Are you too busy, too stressed out, unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This is a show that provides the best inner tools and strategies to help people like you to break free of habits and patterns that are keeping you stuck in place, even with the busiest schedule. I want you to know that my whole intention is to help you improve your health, your well-being, anything that helps you to create the life you want. So today's episode is about how you can make plant-based eating a habit in fun and interesting ways, one little step at a time. As you know, you don't have to do everything right away, but I want to just give you great information to help you make decisions and choices that can support you in the most healthiest way. This show is for anyone that wants to cut back on the meat that they eat and eat more vegetables, or it's for vegans looking to benefit even more from the healthiest plant foods. And today I have my awesome guest, Sharon Palmer. She's a registered dietitian. She's a food and nutrition writer and plant-based nutrition expert. And she's here to give us some tips on how to get started. Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, it's so great to be here today.
I am happy you're here. I do these episodes where I bring on people to just talk about what it's like to be plant-based in all different aspects of eating. So I'm happy you're here to give us some tips about how we can make habits around eating plant-based. And I know you've written some cookbooks, so you can also give us some tips on what we need to cook. So just tell us more about yourself. You're a fascinating lady and you're doing a lot of work.
Yes, I'm very interested in plant-based nutrition. I've been a registered dietitian for 25 years plus. I graduated from Loma Linda University, which is kind of a famous nutrition program there that focuses on plant-based nutrition. So I kind of got that early start in my career learning about plant-based nutrition in that way. In fact, it's one of the blue zones. I'm not sure if you've heard of the blue zones.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so Loma Linda, the community there is a blue zone, and it's a meat-free campus on the university. So they were well ahead of their time when I went to school there. And so I've been working in nutrition for a long time, and I'm an editor of a publication called Environmental Nutrition, and I'm nutrition editor of Today's Dietitian, as well as writing my books, The Plant-Powered Diet and Plant Powered for Life. And I go around the country speaking on plant-based nutrition at conferences. And I have a blog, a daily blog on eating a more plant-based diet. And really, I agree with your philosophy. My philosophy is that I really want to help everybody eat a plant-based diet, because I think no matter what diet you are on, what kind of lifestyle you have, there's room to eat even a more healthy, whole foods plant-based diet. So I try to reach people where they're at.
That's just awesome. But can we go back just a little? Can you just tell the listeners what a blue zone is? Everybody may not know what that is.
Yes, well, the blue zones was this concept by Dan Buettner, who wrote about it. And he's since written some books on the subject as well. But he identified places around the world in which people live the longest. So he found these places throughout the world, and in the United States, he identified Loma Linda. And he looked at the common characteristics that these places had in terms of habits. And one of the things he identified in all of these blue zones, these places where people live the longest, is that they eat mostly a plant-based diet. So in Loma Linda, they have a very high rate of vegetarianism. And there are other things he identified, that people have exercise every day, and we're not talking about just going to the gym. We're talking about having it as part of the lifestyle, walking and farming and gardening and those kinds of things. And also they have a lot of emotional support in their community and family. So he identified various factors. But when it comes to nutrition, the common thing was that they mostly eat plants.
Okay. How do you help people, let's say in the U.S., that are so busy in their lives? And, we're all busy. And a lot of times we've learned not to take a lot of time to cook, especially if we're busy in our lives with work and family and kids. So how do you get someone to go from not really wanting to cook and eating a lot of processed food because it's just easier and it's good? How do you get someone to go to more plant-based eating?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I think that a lot of people have this perception that if they're going to eat a plant-based diet, it's going to be more difficult for them. But, I like to get people thinking that it doesn't have to be so complicated. That's one of my major goals. Well, first of all, I really want to help people cook. And what I mean by cooking is it can be very simple things that you can put together quickly. But people do feel intimidated about cooking. So one of the things I do is I like to recommend some quick, easy things that are your go-to meals so that you know how to put them together quickly. You have them, your ingredients on hand. If you create what I call a plant-based pantry, where you have these things, a lot of the ingredients in a plant-based diet are shelf-stable. They can last for months. So you can have these things on hand all the time. Things like whole grains, dried beans or canned beans, herbs and seeds and nuts. These are all things that you can keep on hand for a number of months. So if they can be the basis of your diet, and then by adding fresh, seasonal, local foods like produce, then you can combine these into healthy meals. But it doesn't always have to be really complicated. You don't have to get out a recipe for every meal you make. It can be really easy, something like beans and rice with a salad, sauteed vegetables with tofu and a whole grain. So it can be something that you can throw together quickly. It doesn't always have to be complicated.
Well, thank you for answering that question. I ask all my guests that come on here to talk about plant-based nutrition because that is a big question that I get from everyone that's thinking about eating more plant-based food or that's really resisting because they don't see how they can not only survive on a plant-based diet, but afford it. So that's a big deal. So that's why I love that you answered that question because it's so important and it gives people an idea, like you said, that it doesn't have to be hard. It can be simple. So thank you. So can you talk about some of the common myths around plant-based eating and give us the real truth about it? Healthy food, eating on the road, eating at home.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the myths that I encounter, we already talked about the fact that it's going to take longer, but that is one of the big myths. And I think it's really important that people understand that they can put together meals in minutes. Every night I can put together something in less than half an hour. I always say I can put something on the table quicker than you can go do takeout and bring it home. So that's one main concept. But another concept I think that people struggle with is they think they're going to miss out on nutrients. They're not going to get enough protein or something like that and not eat a balanced diet. But it's completely possible to eat a healthful, balanced diet and even be 100% plant-based. Now we have research over the last decade especially that shows people who eat even a completely vegan diet, they live longer, they have less heart disease risk, they have less type 2 diabetes, less cancer. So we know that there are health benefits. And if it's planned well, you can meet all your nutritional needs and even eat a healthier diet. So, we have to get that myth, we have to get past that myth that you can't do it and meet your nutritional needs. So, but it does take careful planning. People have to make sure they're not feasting on junk food. I like to say when you're eating a plant-based diet, you have to make your food work for you. You can't just fill up on highly processed foods. It should be mostly focused on whole foods such as whole grains, pulses like beans and lentils, soy foods, nuts and seeds, and then lots of fruits and vegetables.
It's funny that you talked about protein. I've been plant-based for many years, but I always get the question after I talk about plant-based. So what do you do for protein? Can you talk a bit about what people can do for protein? Because there seems to be a myth out there that if you're plant-based, you don't get enough protein.
Yeah, and the research shows that on average, even people who are 100% plant-based are doing fine with protein. The studies that have looked at nutritional intakes for average people on a plant-based diet. So it's completely possible. And, one of the big myths is that we need so much protein. We really don't need very much protein. There's this idea recently that protein is kind of like the king of the nutrition world and we just need so much of it. But the human body, the Institute of Medicine says we need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you take your kilograms of body weight and you multiply that times 0.8, that tells you how much protein you need. So depending on how large you are, you could need somewhere around 60 grams, 70 grams per day. And people have this idea they need so much more than that. So it's not a lot of protein that we really need. And if you're getting a really good source of plant protein at every meal, such as legumes or pulses, beans are very high in protein, lentils, soy foods like tofu, a lot of nuts like peanuts and almonds are very high in protein. And then you're combining it with things like whole grains, which can be very rich in protein, and even vegetables are rich in protein. So you're getting these protein sources. So I just like to recommend that at every meal you get a really rich source of protein, which would be something like soy foods or lentils or beans or nuts, and then combine that with other healthful foods, and if you do that, you'll meet your protein requirement.
So if I am someone who's listening and tomorrow I want to stop eating, I want to cut back on my meat intake, I want to cut back on my processed food, what would you recommend that I do as a first step for my first meal where I'm looking at eating more veggies?
I would say that you plan that meal around a plant protein, which could be something like lentils, for example. That could be your star of the plate. So when you're thinking about most people think about planning their meals around an animal protein, such as chicken or beef. Now you're switching gears and you're thinking about planning your meal around a plant protein. So, for instance, if you decided lentils were going to be that plant protein, then you could decide, what kind of grain you want to serve that with. Maybe you want to try farro tonight, which is pretty rich in protein, or quinoa. And then you look at your vegetables. I recommend at least 2 servings of vegetables with your meals. Breakfast can be harder, but when it comes to lunch and dinner. So you might decide you want to serve that with, make a lentil stew with zucchini, and you may decide to serve that with quinoa, and then maybe have a tossed salad on the side. So that's how you just switch gears and you start planning your meals around that plant protein.
Awesome. So what do you recommend for breakfast? Something that's really quick when you're on the go. You wake up, you go to the gym maybe or not, and you want something quick for breakfast right before you leave the house.
Well, my go-to breakfast is steel cut oats, and it may not be the quick to produce right off the fly, but a lot of people are doing their cooking of their porridges for the week, and then just reheating a small batch. So that's something really quick and easy that you can do. Another thing that I like to make is breakfast sandwiches with a whole grain bread and maybe some baked tofu and tomato slices, or an avocado slices is another thing, or even peanut butter on toast.
Okay.
I like to recommend getting a whole grain serving. So that could be like your porridge or your whole grain breads. And then I like to recommend a protein serving, and then a fruit. And if you can get a vegetable in there, that's great too. So it could be something like a whole grain breakfast cereal with soy milk and fruit. That's really easy too. So, and some people are doing smoothies in the morning. I have a really good recipe for a breakfast smoothie in my book, Plant Powered for Life, that's like a meal in one. So that's another thing that you can whip together and then sip on it on the go.
Wow, that's awesome. You've certainly given me more ideas than I eat oatmeal every morning. So it gets kind of boring, but you've just given me and the listeners some ideas on how to expand breakfast in a healthy way. So can you tell us about your book, Plant Powered for Life, and where we can pick it up? Because I feel that book can support us in our decisions and choices that we're making on a daily basis to become more plant-based.
Yes, that's my second book. My first book was The Plant Powered Diet, which I call the Bible of plant-based eating. It tells you everything, from which food groups to focus on and meal plans and shopping lists and all that. And then my second book is really more of an easy rule book for plant-based eating with recipes. It has full color photography and really beautiful, accessible recipes that kind of highlight each rule. So I have 52 rules for eating a plant-based diet in the book, and they're very simple, easy to achieve rules. So you could take one rule a week and over a year create these healthy habits. That was my idea, is to really, if you just took one rule a week and tried to adapt that as a habit. And then I've got recipes that kind of focus along with that. So a lot of people use it as a cookbook, and then a lot of people use it as in addition with the rules. And my style of cooking plant-based foods is that it's very global and seasonal and local. I like to include cultural food flavors in my dishes so that they're very beautiful and delicious. I really think that plant-based food is so good. It can be delicious, and I don't want people to feel like they're missing out. So when you look at cultures around the world, many indigenous cultures are plant-based. So there are a lot of recipes and dishes and cooking styles that we can learn and apply to a really healthy, delicious diet.
I hear what you're saying. I remember the first time I became plant-based when I initially started. I felt I was tasting my food for the first time. I didn't taste salt. I didn't taste sugar. I was able to actually taste the vegetables and just really enjoy a meal that I hadn't experienced before in a different way. So I get what you're saying. So can you just give us an example of a rule when you say you have rules, one or two maybe?
Yeah, well, one of my rules is to eat, for example, this is one of the rules in the book, is to eat more whole grains. Okay. So instead of focusing on refined grains, and this is one of the major problems in the American diet, is we're eating way too many refined grains. So really focusing on most of your grain choices in their whole grain form. And when I mean whole grain form, like the preferred form is intact grains, because grains are actually a seed of a plant. So if you're visiting a farm where they're growing grains, it's actually a grass plant, and they harvest the kernels, which are basically seeds on that grass plant. And you can see these whole kernels right off the plant, and that's a whole grain. And it can be simmered like rice. For example, brown rice is the one thing we can really envision as you're eating the entire kernel. So this can be done for any of the grains, like quinoa. We eat the entire kernel. You can do the same thing with farro, which is a type of wheat berries, rye berries, bulgur, barley. These are all where we're eating the kernel. And when you do this, you're gaining so much more nutrition, lots of fiber, very satiating. The glycemic index is really low on these compared to when you grind them into a flour. So I really like to recommend eating more whole grains in their natural form. And one of the other rules in the book, for example, is to have fruit for dessert. So that way, you're reducing your dependence on sugars and sweets, because fruit becomes your natural go-to dessert, and you're getting in all those whole servings of beautiful fruit, and it's much better for us. We're reducing our sugar intake. getting more antioxidant compounds and vitamins from eating that fruit. So that's a really healthy habit just to start getting into is that becomes your go-to dessert.
Well, Sharon, I really want to thank you for being here today to talk to us about how we can become more plant-based in our eating habits every day and looking at things one step at a time. But the key here is to get started. And I believe you've given us some tips on how we can start right away, incorporating more veggies on our plates, crowding out other processed foods that just may not support us in our goal for optimal health. So I want to thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sharon's website and links to her books will be in the show notes for this episode. So I'd like for you to really check her out if you're interested in starting a plant-based life. And if you found something of value from this episode of Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, I want you to share this episode and others with people. Show them how to subscribe, whether they're online or on their phone. Or you can leave a message here at Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. You can subscribe on the page, or you can leave me a voicemail and a comment letting me know what you think about the show. If you're starting eating plant-based, I want to hear what you think about it. How is it supporting you, and what are some of the benefits that you are experiencing? Or if you have any questions around what to do, what not to do, reach out to me, contact me. I want you to be a part of the Balanced Living for Busy Professionals community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.